You're listening to AM 1488 Patriot Radio. You're on now with your host Girth Guntwell on The Truth Report.
Welcome back, fellow freedom likers. This is Girth Guntwell, America's constitutional fetishist. We've got a great show for you today. Former FBI agent and current shopping center security consultant Vandermeer Thurlow will be here to talk about Hillary's emails. Did she send nude photos to Benghazi mastermind Ahmed Abu Khattala? We'll find out. Later, gun rights correspondent Chubbs Nubbins will talk us through how to get a handgun on an international flight using only a single orifice and some Vaseline. And Tabula Hordsby will be by with some quick and easy trans fat-based recipes you can use to keep your sons large and Michelle spited. But first, we're continuing our countdown of the top 500 insulting Obama names. O'Bungler, O'Bungus, O'Butt Munch, O'Butt Kiss, O'Butt Smell, O57 States, O'Barf Sack, O'Crumbo, O'Crack Smoke, Hip Hop.
It's episode 5, guys. It's episode 5 of the Chapo Trap House. You're not listening to Right Wing Talk Radio. You're listening to us, your friends. We're back again. That was Matt's introduction. By the way, I'm Will Menaker, and again, with me as always is Matt Chrisman and Felix Biederman. That was Matt's introduction to the show, counting down all of the best TCOT Obama names. But right after that, I wanted to read this at the beginning of the show because I think it's a good introduction for a topic that we're going to talk about a little bit later with Carl Bezier. But this is a Free Republic comment that I found this week that I thought was great, and it sounds exactly like what Matt just read. So this is on a Free Republic thread, and the title of the post is 324 Days. So I'm going to read it now. It is 324 days, 5 hours, 41 minutes, 46 seconds until the disgusting, Marxism-loving, arrogant, Christophobic, nefarious, lying, imperious, preening, opportunistic, petty, heinous, haughty, imperialist, vengeful, pathetic, self-centered, constantly golfing, despicable, Che idolizing, destructive, Islamic, ruthless tragedy celebrating, malevolent, Caucasian-hating, nasty, loathsome, homosexual, Allah worshipping, failing, patronizing, oligarchist, disastrous, anti-American, sissified, thin-skinned, oppressive, hateful, racist, Muhammad-loving, traitorous, evil, supercilious, angry, incompetent, treasonous, Supreme Court destroying, threatening, middle finger waving, breacher of trust, socialist, petulant, deviant, violence provoking, constitution ignoring, malignant, narcissist, noxious, saboteur in chief, illegal, hideous, communist, gay, crack smoking, pernicious, Kenyan, crypto Muslim, dictator, usurping, so-called president, Stompy Foot Obama, who is a now confirmed supporter of Islamic terrorists, leaves office.
You know, the Islamic terrorist supporting is one thing, but it's really the constant golfing that gets me. That's definitely number one on my list.
I really thought it was messed up when he invited the Muslim Brotherhood to golf with him, and they were like, "Do you support Sharia law?" And he was like, "Watch this drive."
No, that was, I think that for your public thread, I think they covered everything, and I think Matt covered most of the Obama names. We're going to be talking the coming TCOT revolution or rebellion against the evil Muslim Marxist government in a little bit. But just to kick things off here, I would like, as usual, to thank you, the listeners, the chap heads, the chapsticks, for continuing to show love on our Twitter feeds and come out. I really appreciate it, all the nice comments we've been getting. And also, we will continue to grow because actually we just got off, all three of us just got off an interview with Sam Reisman, who works for Mediaite. So be on the lookout for a Chapo Trap House profile at Mediaite coming, I think, on Tuesday. So again, we just continue to amass fascination and media attention from all corners.
It's because we neg them so savagely.
Yes, exactly.
I wanted to make this a surprise for you guys for tomorrow, but Inspire, the Al-Qaeda magazine, has contacted us.
Really?
Yeah, they want to do a thing about us.
I was hoping for Dabiq, the Islamic State magazine. Is Inspire even a printed magazine anymore yet, or they go totally online?
Look, Inspire is right now on a similar model to Pando Daily,
Subscription only.
I'm sorry, guys. I don't know anybody at the Beak, and as you know, I went to school with Anwar al-Awlaki, and he's no longer there now. But like, I know a lot of people through him. So like, you take what you can get. Okay.
Well, again, we are somewhat frightened by the continued popularity of the show, but in a good way. It's good to push your limits and push the boundaries of what you thought was possible, and that we are making possible with this little show called the Chapo Trap House. But let's see. I'm actually I'm on a little vacation right now. I'm not broadcasting to you from my normal Brooklyn bedroom, but I'm coming to you from the Menaker estate in the Berkshires, in the great state.
Coastal elite.
Yes, I'm in the great state of Massachusetts right now. It's been a house built.
Liberalism, everybody.
I'm in a house built with your tax dollars, folks. That's what I'm doing. But in other sort of elitist, smug, limousine liberal news, we had a good week because Felix and I attended the American premiere of Amazon Studios' Catastrophe, starring major Twitter celebrity, not a minor Twitter celebrity, but major Twitter celebrity Rob Delaney.
That's right. We had a very good time. We really enjoyed the first 2 episodes of the second season, and Rob personally gave us some chicken fingers and some sliders. I treated myself to 3 sliders. In other news, I cannot digest solid food today. I think these things are probably unrelated.
Rob personally placed a chicken tender in my mouth, and he's a very tall guy, so it was easy for him to do that.
It was really hot. I can basically last off the memories of that one for about a year.
It was at the Crosby Hotel in downtown Manhattan. It was a swanky do. They gave us free Swedish fish and jelly beans before the show, and I think we had too many. But thanks again to celebrity fan Rob Delaney. But the other thing that we need to touch on before the show begins, or before we talk to Carl, is Felix. This is more on the ground shoe leather campaign journalism this week. You attended a John Kasich event at a Bay Ridge VFW hall. Is that correct?
Oh, it was not a VFW hall. They changed it from the VFW hall because so many people, including me, RSVP'd. It was, I don't know what it was at. Bay Ridge is a weird place. This is my first time ever going. But it was no less strange than any other John Kasich event I've ever gone to.
Now, this was the same day that great picture of him showed up in Brooklyn just housing a giant hoagie, right?
Oh, yeah. John Kasich ate about, 3 plates of spaghetti, 2 plates of smoked meat, a hoagie, countless other treats, and he spoke about it. When he was talking, he had a very extended section about his own spirituality, which I'm going to talk about a little later, but he talked a lot about how he's running a positive campaign and how that's part of leaving a positive legacy on this earth. And he said, yeah, you saw me in the deli where I was just, oh boy, I ate a lot of food, and these kids from Fordham, they came down and they were cheering for me, and they're cheering for me because I'm running a positive campaign.
They weren't cheering for him because it was like one of those. They probably thought it was one of those man versus food episodes where it's just like some sort of eating challenge at a local deli, and if you can finish 3 pounds of pastrami, you get the 4th one on the house or something like that.
When they set the plate down in front of Kasich, his dicky flapped up like a windshield, just flapped right in his face.
Yeah, then a sexy lady walked by and his eyes popped out of his head. And
that picture is extraordinary, though. He looks like he's so happy. It looks like he's so happy to just be surrounded by all that great food.
I mean, he is, at this point, mine and Virgil Texas is writing about John Kasich. We had morphed reality to fit our timeline to the point where Kasich has only stayed in this race where he's mathematically doomed to this point to get free food, and boy has he.
That behind of him, he looked like the old homeless guy in Groundhog Day when Bill Murray slides his soup over to him and then the food comes and his eyes get really wide.
Well, what I wanted to ask you is like, what was the case? Like a Kasich event in Brooklyn, in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, which is sort of it's more of like the reputation is a more conservative kind of Italian neighborhood.
Yeah.
Hey, so like, what was the crowd like? What are John Kasich supporters from New York like?
This is what's
walking here.
So when we saw Kasich in New Hampshire, we saw like his core staff, and they're like really good-looking, enthusiastic, Mormon-looking people. And there were some of those there, but I saw a lot of Orthodox Jews there. I saw a lot of like, God, do you remember Patsy Parisi's son on The Sopranos? A lot of guys that looked like that. And that, that was kind of it. I remember at one point Kasich was talking about Fordham, and he said, do we have any Fordham students in the crowd? And there were a lot of people who went to Fordham. And this is when he was talking about drugs, and he said, you know what? Drugs don't start, stopping drugs doesn't start with me. It starts with you. And he turns to the kids who say they go to Fordham, and he goes, do you go to any parties? And they say, no. He goes, good couple of nerds. I should introduce you to my daughters. And after like the residual weirdness of this event wears off, he goes, he starts talking about how every kid in there who goes to Fordham needs to go to parties and tell people to not do drugs.
Everyone wants someone like that at their party.
Yeah.
Narcs for Kasich.
Yeah. After the wildly successful Just Say No campaign, there was... So Montel Williams introduced him, right? Montel Williams is a Kasich supporter.
Follows me.
Yeah, he was.
Wait, this is interesting. Isn't Montel Williams also a supporter of medical marijuana, though? I could be wrong about this.
Look, there's no consistency. There's no common ideology. There is nothing but just extreme emotion and weirdness that binds together the Kasich coalition. If anything, you join the coalition by being another weird, incoherent man.
I think, Matt, you put it the best way I think anyone's ever done about like when you imagine like who is Kasich's core of support, and you describe them as sort of dads who exclusively watch the History Channel and just want a president that they can like look up to and respect because they're sort of another white dad like themselves. But that's just not like a big enough section of the modern Republican Party.
Also, the dads who do that, and also the dads who will loiter at a hardware store just looking for someone to talk to, like trying to make eye contact with one of the employees to talk about, the value of a Phillips head versus a flathead screwdriver or something.
Talk about grouting.
Just for a fleeting moment of human connection in this world.
Yeah. People who are really trying to ward off that voice that tells them they're going to die soon.
Well, you said Kasich seems to be preoccupied with death. He's already talking about his legacy in the afterlife, right?
Oh yeah, this was interesting. So Kasich says, as all religious people do, I'm a really big God guy. And he goes,
Good guy here. Love him.
I believe that we're put on this earth with a special purpose, and we have to fulfill that purpose to heal the world. And that's what Montel is doing.
Killing for freaking payday loans.
Yeah, Kasich follows, I think, like a unique brand of religion where Montel is the prophet, and your votes in the Ohio legislature are what you answer for to God. And the best legacy you can leave is running a losing but positive presidential campaign.
Well, that makes sense because I think there's a splinter off of Shia Islam that believes that Montel Williams is the hidden imam.
Yeah, no, that's what the Houthis follow. And the Saudis have paid $3 billion to Mori to invade Lebanon with them.
So, what was their food? What was the spread like at this event?
There was no.
Did they provide snacks? There was no snacks.
There was no food. There's never any food at Kasich events because
he kept it all for himself. Surely.
He's got oilskin lined pockets, and he's got all the food stuck in them.
Yeah, he's just pulling out little slices of gabagool throughout the time. But no, the only person that was really great with food was Carly Fiorina. The only time there was food,
and that's why she's not.
Kasich thing we went to was at his victory party for his second second place victory in New Hampshire, where he had trays of pineapple, ranch dressing, crackers, and celery.
That's probably why Carly Fiorina isn't in the race anymore, because her campaign was spending lavishly on, like you said, chicken tendies and mozzarella sticks.
Yeah. Some good eats at the Carly Fiorina events.
Meanwhile, Kasich is siphoning gas to get to the next stop. He's got that hose in his back pocket at all times.
Yeah, Kasich went up to Marco Rubio and said, "Hey, there's a guy looking for you," and just stuck his hose into the Rubio bus. Sort of a metaphor for the Rubio campaign.
So, did Kasich break any news at the event, or was it just more of his weird rambling anecdotes, like you said?
No news. His anecdotes were weird as ever.
So he wants nerds to date his daughter. He's offering his daughter to like the biggest dork at Fordham, the man who can narc on the most parties. He's like, "Oh, you will have my daughter's hand in marriage."
If you haven't fucked, is Hermit Thrush here? No, Kasich told a very weird anecdote. He said something like, the audio cut out, but it was like, do you know about Jeff Canada? And I can't imagine that this is a place or a human being. I must have misheard it, but it sounded exactly to my ears like you said Jeff Canada.
But Jeffrey Canada is actually a real person.
He's a charter school guy.
He's the Harlem charter school guy.
Harlem Children's Zone or whatever it is.
Oh my God. All right. So he talks about going to a Jeff Canada thing, and he goes, I saw these African-American children and they were speaking Japanese, and it was because there was a fencing program in Japan. And that just goes to show, if you really want something, you'll find out the way to do it.
And that's funny that he's talking up Jeffrey Canada, because I did see a clip from Kasich yesterday where he said, "If you made me king of America, I would do away with all the teachers' lounges at these schools where the teachers just meet and congregate and talk about woe is me. I'd get rid of all of them." So he thinks the teachers' lounge is like the big source of.
And he would also, in just a pathetic attempt at pandering to the dad contingent, literally and seriously proposed making the day after the Super Bowl a national holiday. What was that fight about? The guy who was chanting and got thrown out.
Right. So there was like a nerdy guy in an Oxford shirt who he was yelling at a man in a ponytail across the room and said, "This guy's a Democrat. He's spreading lies about me and my family." And he interrupted Montel to say this. And Montel, the former Marine, the former talk show host, was very relaxed. And he said, "Oh, these guys are just trying to get on TV." To which I say, no, this still isn't going to make it on TV. No one gives a shit. My followers barely even care.
No, he should have said these guys are trying to get on Periscope right now.
Yeah. But it was what a strange thing that was. But there's always some strangeness. Anything with John Kasich, he brings it with him.
Well, that was the Chapo News Desk, everybody. Chapo News Desk for today's show. We are always coming with real, original, on-the-ground reporting. So we're going to have a guest, if you're listening to this, and in a little bit you'll be hearing from Carl Bezier. You know him from Twitter, at Carl Bezier, and if I'm mispronouncing that wrongly now, I will surely correct it later when we talk to him. And just as sort of like a way of introducing that, as I mentioned earlier, the show is growing in popularity, and we're very happy with that. But as the show grows in popularity, so too does my paranoia and anxiety about the fact that basically our two longest running jokes on the show are at the expense of a Mexican drug cartel and the Turkish deep state fascist movement known as the Grey Wolves. And now, Felix, you did this week. You had everyone throw up the Chapo Grey Wolf sign, and I think about 50 people posted photos of themselves doing it. Can you explain why that's funny?
At least 50 people. All right. I mean, I'll explain why we think this is funny. You may not agree, but it's okay. So the Grey Wolves are a ultra nationalist, fascist sort of arm of the deep state in Turkey. They're viciously anti-Kurd, anti-Armenian, anti-anything that isn't Turkish identity. They've committed multiple assassinations and acts of political violence, and their symbol is when you put your thumb with your ring finger and your middle finger, and you put your index finger and your pinky finger up as if to create a wolf with your hand.
It's like a modified heavy metal sign, but make a little wolf. Yeah.
Back from WCW. Kevin Nash and whatnot.
So sorry we enlisted our fan base in that effort to promote fascism in Turkey.
I was most worried because I actually got mine retweeted into Turkish nationalist Twitter, and I got a lot of very excited Turks writing me to say how excited they were about my endorsement of Greater the return of the Ottoman Empire. And I just want to say, you guys, I understand that irony isn't big among ultranationalists, but it was a joke.
I just retweeted you into weird ultranationalist Twitter. Prepare to be inundated with random assassinations.
So basically, as I said, as we grow in popularity, so too does my anxiety about the fact that perhaps some of our jokes are at the expense of some actually dangerous people. So I'm saying right now, if I get even one halfway serious death threat from either a drug cartel or the Turkish military, there's no more Trap House. Like, get a new host for the show, because I am not committed to die for this yet. I mean, obviously, if you listen to the show, you should be prepared to die. The listeners need to die, but obviously not me.
Well, I mean, Will, if you do leave, we are already talking to David A. Hughes.
But those two I am definitely afraid of. The one group that actually is probably most likely to threaten us with death and is sort of like the nemesis of weird Twitter that I have absolutely no fear of whatsoever is the American right-winger, the TCOT personality, the talk radio TCOT Twitter guy who every time something doesn't go their way politically, they begin fantasizing about armed insurrection against the federal government and their liberal enemies. We can make fun of them with impunity because we know, as a scientific fact, they are absolutely full of shit and would never, ever attempt any of these ridiculous fantasies that they repeatedly indulge online. And this is what we're going to be talking about to Carl Bajer. So again, for legal purposes, we're going to call this Ken Barnes' History of the Second Civil War. So stay tuned, and soon you will be hearing from Carl Bajer on this subject. Okay, we are back, and we are now joined by none other than Carl Bajer. You may know him from Twitter at Carl Bajer, but he writes for the Baltimore Post-Examiner, and he is also an OG Bernie bro and veteran member of the Matt Bruenig election team. Carl, how you doing?
I'm doing great. It's good to be here. Good to meet you all and talk to you all in person.
So, Carl, the reason we wanted to have you on was I think you sort of first popped on my radar with this article you wrote back in 2014 that I came across and really loved because it was really funny. But basically, you wrote an article sort of in response to the sort of common idea or sort of common fantasy that plays itself out on TCOT Twitter about that of Second Amendment remedies to unconstitutional government, and this idea that anytime things don't go their way electorally, that they can always rely on the strength of their guns and numbers to sort of foment a kind of second civil war or sort of rehearsal or rehash of the American Revolution to get their way. And again, I'm going to link to this piece in the description, but you wrote a response to this called "Militant Republicans, Nope, You Aren't Going to Overthrow the Government." And I was hoping you did this in response to something someone else wrote in the Baltimore Post-Examiner. So I was wondering if you could sort of outline for us and the listeners, like, what is the sort of most common scenario and fantasy that is invoked among TCOTs when they get their dander up?
Yeah, so I was responding to something a colleague at the BPE wrote, also about guns, and of course, as soon as he starts writing about the possibility of any kind of gun control, he gets spammed with billion TCOTs and Mullen Labe types in his comments, and pretty soon after that, they start planning out their plans to overthrow the federal government. And usually, I mean, it's they have a pretty standard formula. They start talking about how, if we can only, we don't need like some huge insurrection. All we need is like a very small fraction of the U.S. to form this guerrilla movement of, all the men with guns. And then inevitably all of the police will come join us because all of the police are our allies. And then all of the military will come join us because all of the military are our allies. And, before you know it, Obama will be waving the white flag and the second Civil War will be won. So that's the general scenario that he outlined in that one.
I mean, like, just to define our terms for a second, when we say TCOT, that refers to the top conservatives on Twitter. It's just sort of the shorthand for all of the right-wing cranks that are on Twitter that are just like, it's the talk radio section of Twitter.
Well, and then you have the Mullen Labe types, which is another hashtag they like to use, which I guess is Latin for like "come and take it" or something like.
Yeah, it refers. I believe in I think it's Greek actually, because I think it refers to the part of the Persian War, famously dramatized by Zack Snyder in the film 300, where.
Yes, the Battle of Thermopylae, where the Spartans were up against the Persians at the Hot Gates, and
it was like the Persians said to throw down your weapons, and the brave Spartans said, "Come and take them."
Yeah,
and that's what Mullen Labe translates as. It means "come and take them."
Is this when they actually started saying that after 300?
Yeah, of course.
I can't say. I don't know. I doubt the actual Greek phrase "Mullen Labe" was said in the movie 300, but maybe "come and take them" was. I don't know.
I'm sure that's when they started thinking about it.
Yeah, 300 was really a foundational film in the right-wing imagination in this country. But again, this is something that sort of the right wing vacillates between absolute reverence for authority when they're in power and fantasies of the violent overthrow of the government when they're not. And a comment that I see over and over again, especially now in the second term of Obama, where they're, I think, really feeling a little bit disenfranchised, is they said, well, say what you want, but our side is the one with all the guns. So, laugh now, lib, but all of you people in your snarky comments and coffee shops and college universities, you're not packing heat like we are. And that seems to be like the thing that animates them the most.
Oh yeah, absolutely. They're under the impression that there's just sort of an entire you hear this stuff mostly in the South, I think, but just sort of an entire insurgent movement waiting to come out at any given moment. And they're not, they're all would-be Rambos. Like, they're all fantasizing about, you had one guy in these comments talking about his plans for taking out a tank. And that kind of thing. Like, they all just have, I think,
all you gotta do is you got a Diet Coke, and you put enough Mentos in there.
Roll it under the treads.
I started commenting under another name and started outlining the scenario for how I would take out a helicopter. But it was just the Dark Knight Rises, him putting that rope across the towers to take it down. I just started rehearsing that verbatim, and everybody there is like, yeah, I bet that would work. And then I come in the other name. You guys know I'm just doing like a Batman thing at this point. Right? So
Yeah, but hold on a minute. The Nolan Batmans are notable for their incredible verisimilitude. They're very, very real.
I mean,
yeah, that's true.
If you're facing down an Abrams tank and it's backed up by 2 F-16s, what you have to do is you have to get your guys and be like, hey, let's go like full power at them.
Oh yeah, you just gotta run up out of the ditch that you're hovering in, and be brave and shoot well. I guess I don't really know the strategy.
I mean, the thing is, like, it sounds ridiculous, but like all of these things, there is a germ of truth in it. Like, or there's a germ of something that seems reasonable, which is this idea that it doesn't actually take that many people in a given population to act as sort of a revolutionary force, and also that like necessarily the side with all of the money and guns and advanced weaponry doesn't necessarily always mean that you're going to win, right? And I think like an object lesson of that right now in current events is what is happening in Yemen right now between Saudi Arabia and the Houthi and Shia minority in Yemen right now. Like, this is a real world example of a country that is backed by, like the two of the richest powers in the world with all the best weapons are getting fought to a standstill by people who are fighting them basically with small arms and a few RPGs, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, and that's that's how it played out in Iraq too, right? And that's how this is this is more or less the history of modern warfare at this point. This asymmetrical warfare, where you have the U.S. usually or some other imperial power coming in with overwhelming force, and then you have the locals just kind of hunker down and win by attrition.
Yeah, and if you take the broader view, this fantasy isn't so insane because, often it is said, well, you can't possibly hold out against the U.S. government just with a couple, with guns or whatever. But indeed, if you look at Afghanistan or Iraq and with some guns and improvised explosives, basically they did fight America to a standstill, right?
Yeah. Well, so here's where they're.
Here's where this whole idea breaks down if you examine it a little further.
Yeah.
And it depends entirely on who is actually doing the fighting.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Well, this is exactly, and this is where their whole thing just stops working because, when you can win an asymmetrical war, but what happens is it just totally, you do that by turning your entire place that you live into a battleground, and it just totally destroys it. And you're looking at, just sort of massive casualties on both sides constantly. You have to have people who are willing to do the suicide bombings and, that kind of thing. And the people who are gaming this out aren't the sort of desperate developing world, emiserated, radicalized populace who have nothing to lose at this point. These are the overwhelming majority of these people are sort of aging, doughy, middle-class suburbanites who, their entire grievance here, the only reason they're upset in the first place is because they've been made to experience tiny little bits of discomfort, like infinitesimal tax raises and stuff like that. And so there's no reason to believe that they would ever be willing to endure anything like what they're planning out.
Yeah,
there is not a single member of the Houthi rebellion who has a regular table at a TGI Fridays.
Can I point out two things about the Houthis?
Go for it.
First key difference with the Houthis is they've been kind of under the gun for a number of years. They come from these Shia tribes in Yemen that have been on the odds with Sunnis in the country, and a lot of them are nomads, and they were only able to eat because they could shoot birds out of the sky. They're amazing shots, and they're happy to take, not happy to take casualties, but they're totally fine with taking casualties.
Yeah.
Compared to these people who have been sedentary for 8 years, as you've pointed out, but also there are at least 300,000 armed members of the Houthis. And you talked about the numbers game going into this in your article.
Yeah. So the guy I was responding to here was imagining, okay, well, what if we could get like even 0.03% of the population? So you're looking at like 100,000 people, and that's his starting point. And he's like, assume that we could get that many. But there's no reason to even assume that. They can never get anywhere near 100,000 teacots to do anything at all. I don't know.
They were gonna blockade Washington. And like 3 dickheads showed up in a pickup truck and waved a Confederate flag around for the weekend, and then just knocked off and went to a strip club.
Carl, I'm actually gonna quote from you in this piece right now on exactly this issue. You say, quote, "So to paraphrase John Kenneth Galbraith, when a Republican fascist begins an argument, let us assume the correct response is let's not." Let's not assume that the militant right can build a credible guerrilla force from a demographic pool of aging, pampered civilians and a statistical handful of radicalized veteran defectors. Let's not just assume they can mobilize 100,000 combatants in an unusually pacified and disengaged body politic that hasn't seen insurrection approaching that magnitude since the Civil War.
These are like the two most recent examples I can think of these people trying to mobilize. There's the one that I think it was Matt mentioned, the blockade they tried to do on the Beltway, and I actually worked.
I'm sorry, was this the million truckers? The big convoy that was going to shut down all of the traffic coming in and out of the Beltway?
They're just going to block it off. And it's really funny because this is not like an implausible thing. Like, I'm sure you all saw just a couple of weeks ago, some Bernie bros blocked off a Trump rally, wouldn't let people get to the Trump rally. I forget where that was. It might have been in Nevada or something like that. So, I mean, it really only takes, especially if they're in tractor trailers, so many people to block off like a 4-lane road, but they couldn't even get that. I drove to work that day and I just ran my camera to record it. And so there's this video on YouTube, me just driving circles around the Beltway and passing there like I think there's 1 or 2 guys with the Gadsden flag on the back of their truck sort of driving around, but there weren't enough of them to block traffic, so everybody was just going past them. That's the one. And then the other one, I wrote an article about this, or I actually did a photojournal, was Operation American Spring.
Yeah, we're gonna link to that in the description. But yeah, it's so funny. It's so hard to keep all these things in mind. Like they happen, and then there were a lot of them, but they're all were eminently forgettable because nothing happened in any of them.
Nothing. Operation American Spring was even worse because their whole thing is this was supposed to be a very threatening potential coup that they're talking about, and they're like one of their little taglines that they were using is "next time we'll come armed." So their original plan was they're just going to mob the National Mall with just numbers and just in this huge show of strength. So I was like, all right, I want to go see what's happening. I go there, and it took me about an hour to find any of these people at all. And it was literally like less than a dozen, exactly who you would think it is, like 200-300-pound 50 to 60-year-olds standing around in brightly colored shirts, just kind of like being angry and wondering when they can get out to the Applebee's later on or something like that.
It's like 7 days in May. It's like 7 days in May recast with the people from Duck Dynasty.
Carl brought up earlier that these are pampered people. I swear this is the last time I'll bring up the Houthi comparison.
it's a perfect comparison.
You ain't no Houthis, bitch.
Yeah, but all right, so let's compare religious insults. The Houthis, they were involved in peace talks brokered by Ali al-Sistani, the spiritual leader of all Shia in Iraq, even though they're a different sect of Shia Islam with Saudi Arabia in 2010. And a very high-ranking Saudi cleric said that Sistani is an atheist, which, very big insult to an Ayatollah. But they followed this up by an attack on the capital in Yemen, where they killed 40 security forces. People got mad at Chick-fil-A because their owner didn't want gay marriage, and these people responded by eating more sandwiches.
You know what, though? Hey, you want to talk about how the Houthis are such good shots? Not one of them has the high score on Big Buck Hunter. Not a single one of them. At the local Dave & Buster's, these dudes rack up big. They hang around the Big Buck Hunter thing all night, waiting for a chick to pass by and watch them just rack up the kills. Just put them in a sniper's nest with some of Obungo's troops coming towards them. It's gonna be like Barry Pepper in Saving Private Ryan.
I would also like to say, let's see a Houthi dominated Candy Crush.
It's gonna be. It's like the first Metal Gear when you get that invisible armor or whatever, and they're just going to be like sneaking around sniping everybody. Nobody's even going to know I hit them. It's going to be like a small elite force of like 3 or 4 of them.
You won't know that you're going to be killed until you hear Luke Bryan.
It is amazing, though, when you bring up the Chick-fil-A thing, because we talk about how pathetically bad they are at mobilizing people to actually show up in numbers and try to assert force, but they're fantastic at fucking gorging, which really does seem like it's the exact opposite skill set you want out of an elite force of guerrillas.
For an irregular army.
I mean, what did Mao?
Obama wouldn't even have to unleash the A-10 warthogs or anything. All he would have to do is like embargo like beef and fucking chicken tenders.
All Obama would just have to say like, hey, I think it's homophobic to eat poop. Dysentery. I mean,
I don't know if they're doing this because they hate Obama. I think they're doing it because they really like Chick-fil-A. Like that's where so much of that. Like if you look, they have their Chick-fil-A protest, they have their Papa John's protest. Like the right has realized they can really mobilize people around fast food controversies.
I mean, what did Mao say? But the revolutionary is a minnow and the fast food joint is a pond.
But I mean, this is a point that I think that this is probably the key point that you make in your article, Carl, is that essentially if you are going to decide to engage in irregular warfare with a nation state, let alone the most powerful nation state in the history of the world, you are basically signing on to lose every single thing that you have. Every single person you know, your family, your friends, will almost certainly meet a terrible end. And the answer is that the people who are successful at this are people who essentially, from birth, have had nothing to lose. The demographic that is most incensed about Obungler essentially has everything to lose.
Yeah, like if you look at the old Tea Party demographics, right? They're all just sort of like wealthy, college-educated, upper. Like there is this old liberal stereotype about how these are all sort of like mouth-breathing hicks or something like that.
We talked about this in an earlier episode.
Yeah, like the guys who are into this are basically, you know, like when they're showing their pictures of their guns on Twitter or whatever, like they're always sitting in the middle of some nice suburban house and using guns that, you know, they aren't going hunting with these things. Like these are just sort of prestige collections. I doubt they even bother shooting them very much. They're just kind of sitting in some cabinet in the garage or something like that, you know, to show off to their other teacup buddies.
And again, I'm gonna quote you right now from the article. America's fascists aren't the rugged survivalist killing machines they make themselves out to be. They aren't the young, diverse, and relatively liberal demographic that makes up today's military and law enforcement personnel. They aren't the prime of their lives weekend warrior demographic targeted by sporting goods and fitness marketers. And they are decisively not the young black men who have by far more experience with of gun violence, combat, and conflict with state authorities than any other group of Americans. Nope. American fascists are a lot less like John Rambo and a lot more like the surly dad on Wonder Years. They're the cranky, loudmouth oafs that AM talk radio targets with ads for Viagra and antacids. And when they start talking about their strategy for defeating a tank full of soldiers, all you can do is laugh.
I felt really bad. So just preparing for this a little, I decided to kind of check in on some of the guys who I was arguing with in the comments. And
by the way, they all had names like Diamondback and Jack Burton. So.
This is Leather Warrior 1 checking in from the rumpus room.
Oh yeah,
it's all in the reflexes, Jack.
From my wood-paneled command center.
Warrior Class 3 was another one of them.
And by the way, one thing that you really know about a hardcore guerrilla warrior is that he will accuse you of making logical fallacies in the comment section. And
that's what Patton yelled across the desert to Rommel. You my point, you son of a bitch!
So I was checking in on these guys just to see like what they're up to these days, because they went on about this for a while, and some of them there's one group in particular, they call themselves the Sipsey Street Irregulars, and evidently
wait, where is this street? What street are they referring to here?
I don't know what that's a reference to, but evidently there's some kind of militia I believe they're based in Atlanta. These are the guys, I don't know if you remember when the Affordable Care Act passed and some Congress people had bricks thrown through their windows. Like that was these guys.
Okay.
So these guys,
they're the sons of liberty for the new generation.
Yeah. So if you dig through the comment section, you can see us sort of going at each other. And then they started posting all this stuff about me on their blog and started making death threats and stuff like that. And
I believe one of them.
Holy shit! Are you okay?
First of all, what the fuck?
Carl, I believe one of them called you. First of all, one guy kept going, blah, ha, 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 ha. He kept writing that, which is always the sign of that you're dealing with a dangerous mind.
People who love to think of themselves as comic book villains.
Yeah, would you want to face Joker in Irregular Warfare? I thought not.
But I remember, Carl, one of them called you, he said, "We don't need to worry about you. You're weak, physically and morally."
Yeah, because moral weakness has always been such a hindrance to military success.
Yeah, no, you've got to have valor, right, and loyalty and all that.
I'll fucking steal it if you got valor, just so everyone knows. I'll steal your valor.
You can always steal valor.
On my way to steal your valor.
So I go to look into these guys and just see what they're up to these days, and it's really sad because the Sipsey Street Irregular guy, his blog has just evolved into like him endlessly detailing his health problems. And
no, we shouldn't laugh at that. We're just imagining Patton going around the army hospital, and there's a guy in the corner sniffling, and he goes, "What's the matter with you, son? You look fine." And he goes, "Sir, it's my diabetes." And he goes, "You little creep, you get out of here." He smacks him around.
No, I've got the gout. Please, sir.
My acid reflux.
I mean,
it's only going to get worse in the coming years, right? Because these people are like, if you look at the Tea Party demographics and stuff like that, like they're already averaging getting up to 60s in the 60s. Like, imagine how this is going to be like 20 years from now. Your average guy's 80, and then they're getting much, much older than them, and they're still sort of, I had a guy today on a Twitter threatened to fly out to meet me. Like, are they still going to be able to get on the plane at that point?
Actually, that might be when they're most dangerous, because if they get old enough, they might like lose the will to live, and they could actually be effective suicide bombers. Like you get some decrepit 80-year-old teacots, and you strap them full of plastic
you can fit a lot of
explosives,
scooters,
and you just put them in a Rascal, and you like put a brick on the pedal, on the gas pedal, and send them into a police station or, a congressman's office or something, it could happen.
I mean, Matt, I mean, compare these two credos. On the hand of the Shia martyrs of Lebanon, martyrdom is a gift from Allah that shows us that he loves us. To Kurt Carruthers, I'm fed up with liberals. Who's more likely to die for it?
So, Carl, you talk in your piece about how the military is much more demographically and sexually diverse than the one that these guys kind of are depending upon to carry off their coup, to switch sides if they were to raise the flag of rebellion.
Yeah. So their whole claim that they're going to be able to do anything to the federal government always relies in the end on sort of imagining that the police and the military are going to file in and are going to come to their rescue with all of their combat training and everything. This is always resting on this assumption, which of course they're old, so they're thinking about the 50s military, that everybody in the military is right-wing conservative teacots just waiting for them to waiting for their call. But that's not the way it's been for a long time. You have a much more demographically diverse military, and it's become demographically diverse in ways that almost uniformly tend to skew liberal and Democrat. So, you have more people of color in the military. You have poorer people in the military. You have more women in the military. And while you have some of these sort of older commander level white dudes who are still skewing conservative, all the sort of shocking ground troops that they're relying on to come to their rescue are also disproportionately liberal and democratic. So this is just another symptom of these guys being grandpas and not really understanding the lay of the military land anymore, I guess.
We have plenty of examples of these guys trying to provoke confrontations, and nobody switches sides. I mean, I'm sure plenty of the FBI agents at the Bundy Ranch are going to vote for Trump or Ted Cruz or whoever when it comes time for that. But none of them turn their guns around because, Lavoy Finicum was waving a Gadsden flag at them. And that was that's not name, by the way. That was a real guy's name. He's dead now.
There's, one of the things that the military does is it really teaches you this ethic of loyalty with your fellow soldiers and, of course, loyalty to your superiors and stuff like that. And these guys are just asking them to drop all of this at the drop of a hat and turn their guns on the people who they've been training with and the same group with for such a long time. And it's just absolute madness. That's never the way that it's worked out. You see in all these staged protests or all these standoffs where you have law enforcement or you have military there, I mean, it's absolutely certain that some of these guys are Republicans or conservatives and have, some degree of sympathy maybe even for what's going on. But that does not at all mean that they're actually going to take up arms against the federal government. That's just, it's insane.
Yeah, no, I mean, these things devolve into weird infighting. I mean, you see one of the only places where conservatives have organized in any, I guess not meaningful, but anyway, in the last 8 years, and it's on Twitter, and it's under the TCOT hashtag or the Molon Late hashtag. But if you look at guys like they're always breaking with each other. They're always screaming at each other. They're all like, "Oh, I found out that Gun Patriot 1963 has been spreading rumors about me." There's always some bizarre interpersonal drama that gets into, like, he was DMing my wife, or I think this guy working for Dana Loesch, or fucking whatever. And how is that going to work when these people would try to implement a command structure? Because even in asymmetrical in warfare, even in a guerrilla army, you have a command structure. I mean,
they're all assuming they're going to be the commanders. Every last one.
That's great. That's great when you have 1,000 guys who all want to be the general.
They show up to the first muster, and they've all got their guns, and it's like, who's in charge? And then they all raise their hand, and they're like, oh, shit, we didn't figure this out. And then they just have to shoot one another.
Yeah. I mean, like, we've talked a lot about, like, Middle Eastern insurgencies compared to these, but, you know, like, okay, Lebanon, Hezbollah was incredibly successful, but Lebanon was a country that was more or less in some level of civil war from 1955 on. Like, people learn that they are in a culture that's experiencing war, compared to people who can't even maintain a hierarchy on a hashtag.
Yeah.
It's like if you imagined any previous generation of civilization, because we kind of have prided ourselves on sort of democratizing the totally pampered and conflict-free existence of aristocracy. And it's basically imagining, you know, take every inbred dipshit Habsburg and their kids who, you know, the kind of people who wouldn't be able to fire a weapon without breaking their shoulders due to, you know, their congenital bone defects, and just saying, okay, you guys got to go defend the frontier now. How would that have settled out, you know? And we have the same situation here. The most pampered people in basically the history of the world, like the most democratized softness. And I'm absolutely including myself in that. I am as soft as the Pillsbury Doughboy, but so are these guys.
Yeah.
The idea of them being thrown into some thresher of just brutal civil war is beyond ridiculous.
It'd be funny.
Oh, it'd be hilarious. And speaking of hilarious, the other article we wanted to talk about besides yours, Carl, is a piece of lyric poetry by friend of the show and possessor of a hot wife and a pool, Kurt Schlichter.
The god.
He's also a touring comedian.
Well, yes, and this is the piece we're going to talk about. I'm sure he would tell you that it's an attempt to be a joke, and that if you take it seriously, you're a stupid libtard. But there's clearly poking through it a yearning for violence and a yearning for conflict. But instead of fantasizing about the bloodshed, which he does sometimes, like, for example, after the Paris attacks, when he tweeted that he was watching the news while loading magazines in his living room, you know. This is more lighthearted.
I love, by the way, when Kurt Schlichter said he was watching the news of the Paris attacks while loading magazines, and then doing what with them? Like, we didn't hear about a penguin-shaped former military officer flying to Paris or Raqqa to take out ISIS high command. He loaded ammo into his guns and then just, like, put them back in the safe.
If ISIS shows up on his block, he will be ready for them. That's the extent of his commitment to it. He's not getting out of his pool. He's got the magazine stacked next to the jacuzzi, and if ISIS literally comes into his backyard, he'll shoot them.
Yeah, it's a plan.
So the piece he wrote, this is the last year, August 10th, 2015. Hillary's hipster army prepares for the second civil war. And so in this one, it's sort of, he's building up his own side just by contrasting it with what he sees to be the absolutely just deracinated weakling soul of American liberalism, and how they've been rendered by their political correctness and their safe spaces totally incapable of the war to come. So we'll do a little bit of a reading from this. And to President Clinton, President Abbott said into the camera, I ask that you stop your threats of war and allow the free states of America to separate in peace, and let our two nations remain brothers instead of enemies. Good night, and God bless all Americans. Arg! Shrieked Hillary, heaving her tumbler at the Oval Office big screen. The empty glass missed, hitting a bust of Saul Alinsky on the mantel. It smashed into a cloud of shards and ice. She certainly didn't let any of her Macallan Laquique whiskey go to waste. Her entourage cringed. They hadn't seen her so mad. Her is capitalized, by the way. So mad since she also capitalized, made a surprise visit to Chappaqua and found a wrinkly Bill eating a Big Mac in the bubbling hot tub with a 19-year-old blonde CW actress, Chelsea's bustiest bridesmaid, and the chick who carried a mattress around because of patriarchy.
Wow, really hitting every kind
Everything.
of episode.
It's amazing. I mean, the Big Macs, like that's literally like that's first term Clinton shit. I mean, he's been a vegan for like 5 years.
Yeah, just like every other rich guy. Why not just like also throw in like, and he was jacking off on the Arkansas death list.
Like he cannot let a single phrase go by in this entire piece without looking for some desperate opportunity to just jab at Hillary and jab at the libtards. So, you know, like he's like, it's not just Bill sitting in the hot tub, it's Wrinkly Bill. And I'm surprised, like, you know, not just a Big Mac he's eating, it's a shitty Big Mac. You know, like he just can't.
Bill Clinton was in his bad hot tub with a bad woman with his evil penis going in her shitty vagina. Like, oh wow, Kurt, you really put me in the scene.
This is comedy, libtards. This is top flight comedy. This is the shit that he submitted in his packet to write for Jay Leno in 1995. And got rejected, and he's been bitter about it ever since. He goes on to list why these 24 conservative states have seceded, quote, quickly, peacefully, and reluctantly, which, from what we've been talking about, I don't know. It seems like they're kind of dying to do something like this. And he talks about Hillary's unconstitutional executive orders, things like a right to environmental justice, a right to state-funded abortions at any time until the baby leaves the hospital. Exceptions to the First Amendment that allowed her to ban critiques of Planned Parenthood and demands for stricter immigration and criticism of, in quote, in capitals, Hillary herself. But the boulder that broke the camel's back was Hillary's unilateral ban on private ownership of guns. As we know, that would be it. We must protect the children. I mean ones that have been born and left the hospital. Those children only, not others. The governors of the primarily southern and midwestern states of what would become the free states secretly met, planned, and acted. By the way, I love the idea of a fucking Gomer like Scott Walker or somebody trying to go to secret secession meetings and not tripping on his dick on the way out and just blabbing to every reporter he talked to.
Yeah. Scott Walker would be like the Rudolph Hess of this situation. Like he would fly to Washington, D.C. to offer a peace treaty, but also fall on the tarmac on his face and ham sandwiches fall out of his pocket.
Yep. You gotta have the ham. The big issue was securing the military installations on seceding soil. There was no siege of Fort Sumter this time. Most of the commanders of those bases and most of their troops hailed from the free states. They joined the new nation's military, which served under the same constitution, quote, or parentheses, though interpreted accordingly to its text, not liberal necessity. And under the BTW, motherfuckers, that's what you're supposed to do. Parentheses, and under the same flag, though with about half as many stars. So that's what's going to do it. It's going to be the ban on weapons, which of course I think that's what they've always talked about. Like, because it seems like that's the straw, right? Always. It's always the gun confiscation. It's never really anything else.
On the camel's back.
Yeah, you could always imagine that it kind of implies you could get away with a lot of shit as long as you let them keep the pacifier. As long as you give them the illusion that they can fight back with the gun, they'll probably not let you do anything. You know, you can have like every American could have a fucking predator drone assigned to like follow them around 24 hours a day, and they'd be okay as long as they had access to their guns.
Yeah, in Kurt's fan fiction, like President Hillary makes it illegal to criticize her, and people are like, "Oh, all right." But then, like when she doesn't allow people to have guns, they're like, "All right, it's gone too far." I want to comment more on Kurt's writing. It's really good. I like how when Hillary talks about guns, she's like, we need to protect children, except for the ones that I abort, that I like to kill. Like I also commanded them to kill Vile Rat and Ambassador Stevens and Glenn Doherty.
And Vince Foster. And Ron Brown.
It's a very holistic vision of the world.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so then we've got she's in trouble now because most of the military is gone, and she's got to get she's got to get a military to kind of form up to fight these insurgents, and the highest level guy she can get is this lieutenant colonel, and in a bit of attempted humor, he's got a nerd name of Myron Putney.
Yeah, why not just like call him like Devin Fag? You go for it, Kurt. No one's paying attention.
Lieutenant Colonel Putney, he had been a major with no hope of promotion just the day before, surveyed his new unit, mostly filled with new recruits from northern cities and universities who volunteered after a massive mainstream media propaganda campaign. Many were women who, on average, could do more push-ups than the men. Because of the inclusive Army, quote-unquote, new regulations, there were a lot of unusual hairstyles and beard choices in the formation. One neck-bearded guy who had been inspired to join the war effort by The Daily Show raised his soft hand. I have to say, I love that their like paranoid view of Jon Stewart as like the Leni Riefenstahl. Yes, Private. How long is this training today? Because I have a thing tonight I totally have to go to. It's this open mic reading where we take the ideas we've been journaling and share them, accompanied by a squeeze box and a lute. Mine's about being male. Mine's about how being male identified makes me sad. Replied the colonel. Another hand went up. Yeah? Yeah, I was at a lunch today and there was totally like no vegan alternative. Plus, nothing seemed artisanal or locally sourced, and I felt my dietary needs were being marginalized. So that's the Army that's going to have to fight, according to Kurt, the real Americans, the ones who eat steak every day.
It's also like, I want to point out we make fun of like lefty, nominally lefty college students who protest racist stir fry or whatever. But like, isn't Kurt's thing of like just stuffing your face with Chick-fil-A because people said something was homophobic, or like gorging yourself on the homophobic pasta or eating in a homophobic bakery? Like, isn't that just as fucking stupid? Like, you're also doing fucking retarded food protests. Like, you're not better than anybody.
No, either way, it's this fetishized obsession with consumption, as in instead of politics.
Yeah,
it's the same thing. The idea that one is virtuous, and I mean, I gotta say, I mean, he's talking about how these pathetic losers, with their queer vegan diets and everything. I mean, who's more likely to fucking keel over of a heart attack in the first engagement? Is it going to be the vegan or on the Clintonite side, or is it going to be, porkly Horsbiggins who fucking keels over because he just ate 17 chicken nuggets in a row?
Also, I like how he says northeastern cities. Like, yeah, no, like a lot of the Army does come from northeastern cities. There are Dominicans and Puerto Ricans from New York and fucking Massachusetts who fight in your retarded wars.
And they're totally gonna join the free states, no question.
It's not Kurt Schlichter, whose entire time in the military was spent in an office in Bosnia.
Yeah, I mean, that's the funny thing, is that he makes fun of how Hillary's army would be a bunch of desk jockeys, but that was what he was.
Yeah, he was literally that. Like, if you watch Kurt Schlichter's stand-up, he's like, yeah, I was in the back end. He has a really nervous, fucking neurotic voice. Where he's like, I was way far back in the infantry, but I'm infantry. And infantry, we like overwhelm people.
Yeah, they don't even explain in this how they're gonna take care of Peter Dow.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, he's a one-man killing machine. So this is my favorite part. This is basically where he talks about when they finally confront this new PC army finally confronts the Free State guys, because it gives them an indulgence to do what these guys are most obsessed with, which is rattle off military jargon to seem like badasses. But before that, there's an amazing moment where he talks about how difficult it was for them to have these units be trained. He says he was proud of the unit's progress, especially after that unpleasantness involving a drunk female's regret over a romantic encounter that led to a 5-day pause in tactical training to address the pervasive rape culture within Hillary's army. So he couldn't, in this thing that has nothing to do with that, he couldn't stop to say that rape is made up. He had to fucking do that. he was compelled to remind people that rape is made up.
It's interesting that Kurt Schlichter is so invested in heterosexual sex, considering what I have heard about him. But we could do an entire Kurt podcast, couldn't we?
Oh God, we could do a series on. We could do a fucking serial about Kurt. Get real deep. Get real deep into what's going on in that noggin. So they have this confrontation between Myron Putney and his gang of PC warriors and this badass Free State guy who used to be his commanding officer named Colonel Reisman. And he says, Colonel Reisman sees Putney and says, "Sheesh, you," sneered Colonel Reisman. "I should have known you'd be involved in that Esther Fark." Just a little Battlestar Galactica humor for you guys. Puffing himself up to his maximum height, 5'9", Putney replied, "I'm here to inform you that you are guilty of treason, and on behalf of the President of the United States, I demand you surrender." And here he goes. This is where you can tell he's jerking off while he's writing this. "Listen up, half-step," replied Colonel Reisman. "I have 19 Delta Scouts watching that circus you call an army for the last month. You have no intel, you have no logistics, and you have no artillery that can get rounds to its guns, much less put them on target. You aren't even a soup sandwich. You're barely a piss biscuit." I don't know what a piss biscuit is, but Kurt seems to have familiarity. Putney began, "Stop talking. It's been fun and games up to now, but this freak show stops here. We're going to shake hands and everyone is going to go away happy back to Fort Living Room. See, across this line is our home. I have 3 heavy brigade combat teams ready to counteract the second we see hostile intent. I have 3 supporting brigades of artillery, including MLRS, sighted in on your axis of advance. You guys turn around, go back to your dorm rooms and coffee houses, and it's all good. But you come into our home with guns with intent to do violence, and we will teach you and your little task force of whiny little hippies, femboys, and commies what killing really is. Do you read me? Now get the hell out of my sight." And so the Second Civil War never happened. When a particularly grave reporter later asked a wobbly Hillary Clinton about why she failed to save the Union as Abraham Lincoln had done, she muttered something about sexist questions and how all lives matter before staggering away from the podium and back into the bowels of the White House.
What is this? Is there a right-wing meme about Hillary Clinton being an alcoholic that I just haven't heard of?
It seems they think she's a lesbian. I know that.
I have never heard this before, and I'm reading this, and the whole thing is she's an alcoholic.
I would like to point out that, like, a big reason that, like, me or Carl or Matt is not voting for Hillary Clinton is that she's a war criminal. Hillary Clinton has no problem with killing people. If, like, the Kurt Schlichter stand-in in this story, like, was really, like, he got, like, maybe 100,000 people together, like, Hillary would immediately fucking wipe them out.
No question. She'd press the fucking Predator drone button herself to destroy that entire military force.
Several hundred thousands of people would die. She would kill several hundreds of thousands of civilians. I mean, like, look, you could criticize Hillary for a lot, but the satirical conceit of this story is that Hillary is unwilling to kill. Very counter to reality.
Well, I mean, maybe she wants to kill, but she just can't get her hippie nerd neckbeard army to kill for her. That's the real problem.
Hillary got four alpha males to die for her in Benghazi, so she could keep running guns to Al Qaeda. Like, she has no problem in it. Like, a lot of guys will kill Kurt Schlichter for her.
That would be amazing.
Peter Dow will do it. Peter Dow.
Oh, absolutely.
Peter Dow is way harder than Kurt Schlichter. Like, Peter Dow was fucking in that action. He's on that war survivor tip. He's got the gleam of the Phoenician dream in his eyes. It's not gonna fucking happen, Kurt.
Kurt's gonna be celebrating the secession by slipping into his pool, and then Peter is gonna rise up out of it like Martin Sheen in Apocalypse Now and cut his fucking throat. So we wanted to end this week's episode with what we imagine would be some of the letters home that the warriors of this imagined and totally gonna happen Second American Civil War would sound like. So we've written a few of these letters, and we're gonna read them now here. Hopefully we'll have some of that mournful Ken Burns violin music to back it up, and it'll it'll put you in the mindset of exactly what it'll be like once this conflagration, this terrible battle of brother against brother totally happens. So I'll go first. My dearest hot wife, Tamitha, we have been encamped at the Golden Corral for a fortnight. We cannot travel farther because our coal rollers have exhausted their fuel supplies, spiting the tree huggers. The Libtide line has but a few hundred yards from our position. There is fighting nearly every day. The battles are pitched, and the Chocolate Wonderfall ran dry yesterday, but we have faith that we will prevail. Hillbots and Bernie babies have joined forces and are harassing our flanks, but we believe we shall soon be relieved by General Hannity's mechanized mobility scooter cavalry. The camp has seen dissension. Privates Honcho Crunchwrap and Ephraim Snart fought a duel after Honcho made love to Ephraim's ghillie suit without asking for permission. Sergeant Horst Wessel IV was executed by Major Grubsnart for possession of compact fluorescent bulbs. But our nightly steak rations prove a deep comfort in the coldness of winter. Soon we shall unleash hell on the hip-hop barbecuers and Sharia law likers on the other side. And when that happens, we shall triumph. In the meantime, I will be thinking of your hot body and our pool and our pre-owned Lexus. Yours, Yertle Q. Angstrom, Corporal, the big nude and red one.
My dearest minority wife, the hordes of libtards descend on us, yet we remain steady. They say that we are mad, but it is in fact we who are laughing. While I reload my Armalite, I think back to our anytime fitness, and how I deign to tell these besotted creatures that it's funny that they're trolling me before I've returned from the gym. Our battalion commander, Lieutenant Golge Hermantrout, was taken out by a BLM hip-hop style thug at 200 meters. I saw a man whom I loved in a not gay way fall to the ground as his head burst into a million little bits. But like all things, this is just funny to me. When I'm interacting with you long after this war, for 3, possibly 4 minutes, I will be vindicated. Golge will be vindicated. Our struggle will be vindicated. In your loneliest of nights, pour a Malbec for me. Do not drink it just yet. Let it sit. Consider it my presence as I do battle with these apostates. Toast it to the fact that the libs are some major dunderheads. Be still. I will never leave you alone in this world, my hot wife. Lieutenant Colonel Kurt Schlichter.
Okay, that's going to do it for this week. I think this is a good show. If you notice that Will disappeared, that's because he had some audio problems and fell into a trap out of a trap door, but he's okay. He's all right. He thinks it's funny. He's actually laughing. But thank you very much, Carl, for coming on the show.
Yeah, it was great. Thanks for having me. Enjoyed talking to you.
All right, and we'll see you guys next week.
Peace.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.